Well, if we are at that stage of empire decline, where we can't even manage like the simplest of things anymore, well, that's demoralizing, and I'm not ready to accept that. Why is Congress asking the wrong questions of the wrong people? Hello, everyone. It's September 4th, 2024, and we need to talk about what's going on, or more particularly what's not going on, in the investigation into the Trump assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania on July 13th, 2024. Very frustratingly, we're starting to notice that Congress is, they are asking questions, but not the right ones. And we're very frustrated by the lack of action on the FBI's part and the almost complete lack of action on the Secret Service's part. This is no longer smelling good. Well, it didn't smell good right from the get-go, but it is starting to develop a very odoriferous stench at this point. So let's start with this. So there were a number of local law enforcement units there on the site, as well as you know, Secret Service was there. Turns out, as we'll find out, maybe not all of them were Secret Service, might more like Homeland Security people. At any rate, this local law enforcement had a number of elements on there, and Ben Schaefer is here being interviewed. You see his picture right down here. He's one of the local SWAT. I believe he came from Washington County SWAT. And here you see the Honorable Andy Biggs asking, you're going to hear in just a second, some questions of Schaefer. And notice over the shoulder there of the Honorable Andy Biggs, you see a timeline. I'm going to question all of this and bring this into sharper focus because something is really missing in this story. So let's listen in and see what we got here.
Let's put it this way. Were radios and communication implements offered to Secret Service by the local operators?
They were, yes.
And what was the form of the communication?
The form of communication would be some type of encrypted.
Let's put it this way. Were radios and communication implements offered to Secret Service by the local operators?
They were, yes.
And what was the form of the communication?
The form of communication would be some type of encrypted law enforcement style radio.
And do you know, did the Secret Service avail themselves of that? Did they obtain those radios?
I believe they were offered, but I do not believe they were taken.
So they did not utilize the preferred mechanisms of communication that was offered to them.
That's correct.
All right, this is bizarre. This is bizarre for a number of reasons. First off, why are we asking these questions of one of the SWAT unit people there? Listen, we have other questions that really need to be asked and answered first. This is a very bizarre thing that this gentleman is being brought forward. Now, when we look at where this gentleman was on the map, he was all the way across the Butler Fairgrounds. He's on the south side. He's 400 yards away from the action. He did manage to run up, and we see him on the roof later with Crooks's body, but he's not the person we should be asking the questions of. You know who we should be asking the questions of? We should be asking the questions of the people who are here in this room that a picture is being taken out of, and you can see there. Here, this is something I got to do. Let's bring this up. So here, I've got my laser pointer out. This is where Crooks's body was found. This is the view of where Crooks was shooting, allegedly, towards Trump. And I say allegedly because we still don't have full confirmation of exactly what happened here. So I'm trying to keep a very open mind about everything. But one thing I can state for certain is that if you were in this second-story Overwatch building, this two-story Overwatch building here, you would have had a very, very good view of this particular roof. And literally, this is such a chip shot right here. I mean, somebody leaning out this window with a .22 pistol could have clearly stopped Crooks. So we have questions. These are the questions that Congress should be asking. What we're trying to do with this investigation is make sure that the right people are asking the right questions. So we're going to continue to push these into the public view for as long as possible so that we can hopefully get the right questions being asked at the right time by the right people. Now, this is a document here. I've presented this before, came out on August 9th, and this is from Grassley's materials. And this is a question that was sent to Acting Director Rowe of the Secret Service, who replaced Cheadle. Remember Kim Cheadle? Oh, the roof's too slopey. It was too hot, right? Her. At any rate, on July 30th, they said that he testified before a joint Senate committee, and he said this, quote, "This point of view is the point of view where the counter sniper team locally was posted. The gold arrow indicates where the shooter fired from. You can see it right there under that red dot that's moving. Looking left, why was the assailant not seen?" Good question. When we were told that the building was going to be covered, that there had been a face-to-face that afternoon, that our team leads met. This was the view. Now, we see the local people saying, how come Secret Service wasn't covering this roof? Secret Service is here saying very clearly, why weren't the local people covering this roof? We have questions. How was this roof not covered? This is a really, really big deal. So we're going to have to focus in on that just a little bit. And we have more questions. But I just want you to remember this frame right here. Looking out this window, it is so dead easy to see where Crooks was firing from. So here's where it gets interesting, right? The local after-action report about this whole shooting coming from the Beaver County ESU SWAT. This is their FPOTUS after-action report. And this came out just day after the shooting, I think. At 1800 hours, which is 6 o'clock, we've been able to, they blacked everything out, but our investigation's been able to fill in the blanks. So this is ESU sniper, counter sniper Greg Nickel, said to somebody unsure of the direction of travel of Crooks, so that's at 6 o'clock. And then at approximately 6:05, the suspect at the picnic tables was moving in the direction of Sheets, which is a gas station about a quarter mile away. It was a very inappropriate way to describe where he was moving because it would have misdirected people. Questions about that. I'm sure you'll have the same that I do. And then said he has a backpack. So this is the first time we've heard about Crooks having a backpack. By the way, he's been spotted all over the place. And we haven't been able to determine where he got that backpack from. But at 6:05 approximately, he shows up with a backpack. And that was communicated by Nickel via radio. And then they say here the Butler sniper stayed in place at original position. This person has been masked the whole time. Just last week, we were able to discover exactly who this person was. And it's a gentleman named Mirko, last name of Mirko. That is sniper number 2. There were 3 snipers, but one left earlier at about 4:20. All right, timeline then is somewhere between 6:06 and 6:12 down there in yellow, right? Look at this. Nickel goes downstairs. He left his post. He goes downstairs of building 1, okay? And that's the building on the roof we just saw the roof of that Crooks was shooting off. They call it building 1. That's known in the American Glass Research Complex. That was actually building 6. So you're going to hear a little building 1, building 6. I hate that they're getting confused. Here they're calling it building 1. If it helps you to think of building 6, then think that instead. But Nickel went downstairs. He left his post, okay? And this becomes particularly remarkable when we look at the larger timelines. And again, this comes from Senator Grassley, Chuck Grassley's materials. So this is a pretty fascinating thing here, and we're going to have to dig into this just a little bit more. Now, how do we make sense of this Greg Nickel leaving early? So first up, this is Greg Nickel right here, sitting here, and you can see him coming out of the building later. He's got a hat on now, but you can see the same chin strappy, beardy thing going on here with the mustache. You can see his big sniper rifle here. It's got folding bipod legs here. It's got a big suppressor or a can on the front. Big old giant scope on there. Well-muscled guy. Looks like he's almost the same color as his shirt here, but this is a short sleeve shirt, and he's got a sleeved tattoo here, which, by the way, is interesting because local eyewitness Greg Smith, he had red hair fake red hair and a Trump hat, and he said we were pointing, and there was there was a sniper up there with a sleeve tattoo. When we were pointing, saying there's Crooks on the roof. They were there. We have an eyewitness saying they saw somebody with a sleeve tattoo in the building at the time, looking out of those same windows that we saw. You could have seen Crooks very easily, and yet nothing happened. So we have questions. Okay. And so this was from an ABC interview. And by the way, if you do watch this guy, Greg, he just does not look comfy in this entire interview. He looks very, very uncomfy. In fact, Let's just listen in real quick. This is a very short clip.
We were supposed to get a face-to-face briefing with the Secret Service snipers whenever they arrived, and that never happened. So I think that that was probably a pivotal point where I started thinking things were wrong, because that never happened. And we had...
That gentleman, Jason Woods, who was just speaking with the bald head, he was the earlier sniper who left. So there were 3 snipers go into this Overwatch building, which would have had perfect oversight and command view of the exact spot that Crooks set up and for sure was on the roof and found deceased on that roof. That spot where he had a rifle just 140 yards from President Trump. This was one of the 3 gentlemen, but if he said earlier on, weeks earlier, he said, hey, I can be there that day. I can help you all set up, but I got to leave at about 4. Turns out he left around 4:20, maybe 4:26, something like that. And, but that's who that was. But I have no suspicions about that because he said he was going to leave and he left when he said he was going to leave. The questions we have are about this gentleman here, which is Greg Nickel. We have a lot of questions here about him because of his timeline. I've covered this extensively. And it's that timeline that bothers us a lot, where we see that allegedly he left his post at 1806, at 6:06. Now, this isn't, get the timeline. They've been setting up for this thing for weeks. They have pre-meetings. They get there at the Butler site, 11 o'clock day of. They're setting up. They're watching things. Greg's in his position. At 6:03, Trump takes the stage. At 6:06, he decides he's got to leave his position. That's the story we're supposed to go with. So we have questions, of course. And this is the other sniper. We've managed to figure out who it is. His name is Mirko. Here we can see him coming out of the building. This is after the shooting has happened. He's obviously got some heavy-duty binoculars, which we interpreted as sniper gear, right? Big heavy-duty binoculars. And it turns out that he has been confirmed. There he is. So this is the Butler County sniper, whereas Greg Nickel is the Beaver County. So Beaver, Butler County, 2 counties there in Pennsylvania where this happened. Now, here's where it gets interesting. We need to hear more from Nickel and Mirko because they left their positions. Well, we don't actually know where Mirko was at all during this whole period of time. Nobody has ever said anything we need to know. It's absolutely investigative process, number 1, to figure out where he was and where he went. Now, here we can see you see the little tiny glint of sun off of that. That's an open window. And here's another open window. You can see the frame standing out clearly. And here you can see the glinting sun off the corner of that window. And here's another open window. This direction here, this is facing south. This is where Trump is, over here somewhere. So rule 1 of presidential protection details is no open windows. Somehow, not only do we have 3 open windows on this side, but we know this is just about a minute before the shooting. I think this picture, this still comes from 58 seconds before the shooting starts. Allegedly, Greg Nickel is no longer in that building. This would be what they were calling Building 2. This is Building 1. This is the building that Crooks is on top of. Allegedly, Greg Nickel had come down, and had come into this building. There's a breezeway or a causeway that connects these buildings. So presumably he's coming inside this building, comes over, and he's come out this side to talk to other officers to help them try and locate where this Crooks guy might be. Question: who leaves their post? And second of all, who would leave their post with windows open? It would not be possible because of how this upper building is divided up. This is a room here. There's a door and a wall in between this room. And I'm not clear if this is open from here to here, but I would suspect that this may be another wall or partition in here, just the way this room is laid out, but I lack that information right now. Don't know. However, because this room and this room are disconnected by virtue of a door and a wall, it would not be possible, even if Mirko is left in position and he's doing his job and he hasn't abandoned his post, but we still have questions about how he was not able to hear all these eyewitnesses yelling, "He's on the roof." People are yelling and pointing. "He's on the roof. He's got a gun." People are yelling this. And it's just a bizarre thing that somebody in this room where the window open and another window open can't hear, can't like peek out the window and notice that there are all these people pointing and shouting. Okay. Questions. How is it even remotely possible that you're in this room and you're not noticing all this commotion down here. And then once you do, that you don't just peek out this window and see, oh, look, there he is. There's Crooks right there. The only possible explanation I have for this, well, there's no good ones, is that they both had abandoned their post, but then they abandoned their post and left windows open. This would be an appropriate line of questioning. Congress, anybody in looking into this, these two guys, you want to talk to these two guys. I got other questions for Secret Service, you name it, for the FBI. But in terms of answering and addressing questions, this is critical. We cannot let this drop. We deserve answers like, A, why are the windows all open? B, why aren't they noticing all the commotion? C, where exactly were they minute by minute during this whole period of time? Because it's just a little odd. Don't you think? Just a little weird that they've been setting up for this thing this whole time. Trump goes on the stage at 6:03 and just 3 minutes later, Greg Nickel just wanders off his post. We have no clue where Mirko is at this point in time. And then at 6:11 and 33 seconds, the shots ring out. Just bizarre, that whole timing, that you're getting all ready for this, but then you crank open these windows and you leave them open. I don't get this. Secret Service does not do this. I've confirmed this and reconfirmed this. Law enforcement tell us that one of the most important things you do during any protective detail is no open windows. They even tape them shut, put tape across them so they can see if the tape is broken, to see in many cases, just to be sure the windows are closed. So even though the two sniper teams, in particular Hercules 2, which is sitting there on the north barn, that's the Secret Service code name for their sniper team, two guys, right? Hercules 2, they were looking north the whole time, and they should have said, hey, we got open windows, right? I don't understand why nobody's making a big deal about these open windows, but we ought to be making a big deal about these open windows. Very much so. All right. So the questions are, where were these two local snipers, Nickel and Mirko, just to focus on them for a second. We'll get to the FBI and the Secret Service just a second. Well, first, they were both actually in place where they should have been. But now we have questions like, what were you doing? Why weren't you looking out the windows? And why didn't you hear all the people yelling about where Crooks was? It's just bizarre, right? They already were suspicious of this guy. They allegedly lost him at 6:05 with a backpack headed towards Sheets. But then the kid just scrambles up on a roof. By the way, this is a metal roof building, and he runs across it. Must have been making just a racket, right? It would have been like Santa's reindeer on the roof. I mean, this kid was going to be like clunkety clunk, clunk, clunkety clunk, clunk. He throws his backpack over two roofs at one point, clang, right? Metal roofs make a lot of noise. They have 3 windows open. Did I mention they have all these windows open? You would have heard it, and you would have heard the people down there yelling about stuff, I think. Okay. Second option, one was left in place. That would have been Mirko, where they should have been. The other, Greg, abandoned his post for reasons. But then we have questions like, if that's true and only one was left upstairs, how is that one person supposed to guard 4 open windows? And why were those windows open at all in the first place? Or maybe they both abandoned their posts. I don't have any video showing either of these two in their positions in the windows, even though people are yelling. I can't see any movement in there, but maybe it's just the trick of those particular videos. And then another option is either or both were actually called away from their post by someone. And then, so this would say, listen, because we have to account for all of their movements, what we really, really need to know is every cell phone communication, every radio communication, everything has to be preserved. And we need to ask a lot of hard questions about these people. But these questions should have been asked the day of. I'm recording this. It's almost 2 months later now, and this is no good. Okay. Question, why did neither of them do anything about Crooks being on the roof in plain sight? This is a very obvious question. We deserve a very clear answer to. Okay. So if we add it all up, when we look at the movements of Crooks and law enforcement, there's some bizarre stuff, right? First, Crooks, he wandered all over the event facility and even flew a drone right before, in the hours before Trump took the stage. He's walking everywhere. He wasn't exactly like a mysterious character lost in a sea of thousands. He was seen and seen and seen again. It's very bizarre. He was spotted 5 times on video alone that we know about, and we don't have all the video of this event yet. So anybody who has video still that you think we haven't seen or the world hasn't seen, please get it up if you can. And then he disappeared from law enforcement view and tracking somewhere between 5:45 and 6:45. Where did he go? How come we have no particular view of this kid? Where did the backpack come from? We just need to know. And somehow he gets on the roof at 6:06. We know that because FBI FBI agent Abate said that, right? That they had some local security footage from a local establishment. They had security footage showing crooks getting on the roof at 6:06. Now, I don't know if that was 6:06 on the dot or 6:06 and 58 seconds. All we have is to the minute, but it was 6:06. But the shots don't ring out until 6:11:33. So we have him on the roof 5-ish minutes, 5.5 minutes, right? We don't know. 5.5 minutes. So that's a long time for somebody to be on the roof of a big, long, flat structure like that, particularly when people are looking for him, allegedly. Very hard to imagine how he escaped all that view. So he lounged around for a couple minutes, and then at 6:08, we actually have him on multiple videos running across the roof structure and then getting into position. And was spotted on the roof by local law enforcement at 6:08. We have radio communications around that. He's on the roof. He's got white shorts. All of that happens. And then at about 6:10, that's when a local law enforcement officer boosted himself up and saw him, like eyes on. So we have questions about that too, obviously. Local, 2 more shots, 2 more minutes before the shots rang out. And then he was spotted by that freshly arrived local patrol officer, not all the officers on site. Kind of weird. Local law enforcement. Now, they had 3 snipers in perfect position to spot and stop crooks. One of them left, so they had 2. Okay. Greg Nickel left that post at 6:06, according to their own timeline, just 3 minutes after Trump took the stage, and we have no accounting of his whereabouts until he's seen again at 6:12 coming out of the door of the whole facility after the shooting has happened. They left 3 windows open facing Trump, and there's no accounting, none, 0, zip, of Murko's whereabouts. Was he in the room? Was he not in the room? Was he on the floor in a fetal position, sick with Taco Bell poisoning? We have no clue. It's all missing in action. So don't quite know what to do about that. And then we have this other question too. So those are questions about local law enforcement, but let's talk about Secret Service for a second. This is a question Congress needs to be asking. Get Secret Service back up there. Ask the right questions, please. Here's one. Why did the protective detail surrounding Trump, why did they not respond? So at 6:10 and 11 seconds, we have enough of a threat detected that Hercules 1 sniper team turned away from their coverage zone. They were facing south. You can see them facing south, right? And then they turn around and they face north, and we have this all on video. And so the question is, why is Trump left on the stage when we have enough of a security threat that the sniper team, whose duty area is south, is now motivated enough to abandon that? Like, the threat signature of that south is no longer large enough to contain their attention because they have to swing north now. So they've clearly gotten some communication from the farther north sniper team who are like, there's a tree in the way. We can't see anything. Can you help? And so these guys swing around and start getting in position. Okay. So lots of questions there. And we have more questions. Now, what do we do with this? All right, we're just going to have to listen in. This just came out, and it turns out that Senator Josh Hawley, who you see there, just to my immediate right, is being interviewed by Jesse Waters of Fox News. Listen to this. This is so unbelievable. I hardly even know what to say.
So what now are we hearing from whistleblowers, Senator?
Well, what I've heard tonight, Jesse.
So what now are we hearing from whistleblowers, Senator?
Well, what I've heard tonight, Jesse, is that most of the agents who were there at that rally in Butler were not Secret Service agents. They were, in fact, Homeland Security agents. And get this, most of those Homeland Security agents, the only training that they received was an online webinar, a 2-hour online webinar. And I'm told that about half the time, the sound to the webinar didn't even work. So think about this. The President of the United States, former President of the United States, Donald Trump, is sent out on stage. Most of the people there aren't trained. They're not qualified. They only got a webinar training, and even that didn't work. It is absolutely outrageous.
You're saying, and if we're to believe that there's this big Iranian threat, that this is coming down the pike and they had to beef up security, their idea of beefing up security was not putting more Secret Service agents and counter snipers, was just throwing in a bunch of guys that have never done this before from Homeland Security and sending them into some Zoom training that didn't work?
Well, when you put
That's
it that
exactly
way.
right. I'm told that actually Homeland Security agents were pulled off of child exploitation cases, child endangerment cases, the stuff they normally do. They don't normally do protective detail work at all. They were pulled off those cases, said, here, you're going to go guard the former president of the United States. Watch this
God.
webinar. Oops, it doesn't really work. Oh, that's all right. Go out into the field anyway. Jesse, this is a nightmare. And we still have no answers. The only reason we know this stuff is because of whistleblowers. It's outrageous.
That is absolutely crazy.
Okay. It just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. So, listen, there's a point at which you can't really distinguish anymore between what we'll call criminal negligence and intentional criminality. It's a very fine line at some point, right? Where, you know, the only options we have to think about this Trump shooting, because it's just so unthinkable that some 20-year-old kid clunked his way on up to roof, clunked his way across that roof. Somehow, magically, the two people who would have been in position to have perfect oversight were just missing in action and just weren't there, and nobody's asking questions about that. It's just unthinkable that that all would have happened, but we have more questions that we'll get to in just a second. It's just absolutely unthinkable, and so the thing we're being asked to consider and think is that this was just incompetence, right? Okay, well, if we are at that stage of empire decline, where we can't even manage like the simplest of things anymore, well, that's demoralizing, and I'm not ready to accept that, right? And I don't believe it either. There's incompetence, I get that, and there's miscommunications, I get that, but this goes way beyond that. And it starts with how this whole site was actually not set up to be secure in the first place. And there are people on record. There was a woman, I showed her in a much earlier episode on my YouTube channel and also at Peak Prosperity, where she had been to like 140 Trump rallies and noticed that this one was different because they didn't have big trucks blocking lines of sight. And she noticed as a civilian that there were too many lines of sight and made her nervous. And she was talking with people in vendor row, because that's why she's visited so many. She sells t-shirts or hats or something. So she's selling Trump merch. And she noticed and talked about it openly with other people who were there saying this doesn't feel right. Right. It was just that obvious. So given that, you know, maybe the fact that this was only a 2-hour webinar is now maybe we can begin to understand this. This video, so we see here, Trump's just about to get shot. And the shots are just about to ring out. Watch how Secret Service actually responds, okay? So first thing, some people get up there quickly. That's fine. We can live with that. But what happens next, this is absolutely bizarre. And I remember I was yelling at my monitor at the time when I was watching this because it made so little sense to me. I didn't even take the 2-hour training with maybe that part of the audio didn't happen. So what I would have done immediately, and the reason I was yelling at my monitor, is you roll Trump off the back of the stage, right? And you grab him under the armpits and you drag him out of sight, out of line. Now watch what they do here. I have no explanation for this. And by the way, you just saw one of those Washington County SWAT guys walk past there in his full kit. And notice if they roll Trump off the back, they now have to account for behind him maybe 100, 150 people. See this guy in the black on the left? He has to scan 15,000 people. And so much easier to scan 150 people than 15,000. So they stand Trump up. Here we go. Right in front of everybody. What if there's a second shooter? And he's exposed. And they've put this 5-foot whatever girl in front of a 6'3" Trump. And here he is, completely exposed, and I did not understand this to save my life. I still don't understand it, to be honest. 2-hour webinar or not, I don't get it. But this is a bizarre thing. And look, she's ducking down. He's totally exposed. She goes to pick up a hat, and he's totally exposed. This doesn't make sense. When you see they're walking down all these stairs, they're about 4.5 feet up in the air. They could have easily rolled him off the back, and he would have been out of sight. And the persons who were there attempting to scan the crowd would have been in a position to actually cover him more effectively. It didn't make sense. Well, maybe now it makes sense because they were totally, completely untrained people. But you have to understand something. Totally, completely untrained people don't end up on a detail by accident. Somebody made the decision that this was the right thing to do. And you got to get those people on the stand. You got to start asking them questions. And you don't let them take the fifth. And you go all the way up the chain until you probably get to Mayorkas, with Kim Cheadle being the cutout to sort of give him plausible deniability. But somebody is making decisions to give really shoddy protection to Trump, which you can guess maybe a little bit would not have, the same shoddiness would not have been given if that was Klaus Schwab or Biden or John Kerry. I mean, you can just imagine the blob, the machine of state. You know what? It's really hard to protect somebody like Trump. Very easy if it's somebody you care about. And that's the nature of this blob that we're up against. I'm going to be talking about this more at Peak Prosperity with my subscribers because it's such an important concept. All right. I mean, iconic photo and everything, but man, rookie time. Like, he's just totally exposed. Nobody knows how many shooters there are at this particular juncture. So any proper investigation is going to be asking exactly where were these guys, Murko and Nickel, full stop. And why didn't Secret Service complain about these open windows? They could see them. They could clearly see them. All three of those windows that are open are plainly visible to the snipers over there on the north, over there on the barns, just to the side of Trump. Even the North sniper team could have seen these open windows. Easy peasy. This is just so not part of SOP for protection details. Why do you not leave windows open? Well, very simply, even though you're back there and you've got your sniper scope and you're in there and you're local law enforcement, what if somebody finds a way into that building, pops you with a suppressed weapon, and now what do they have? They have your weapon and they have an open window. And nobody knows that it's a good guy behind that open window or a bad guy. This is why it's not done. Okay, so a lot of questions, minute by minute, exactly where were these two guys? 100% need to know this. Any proper investigation is going to be asking these two guys. Ben Schaefer might be able to answer some questions, but not the most important ones, because this is where the failure happened. Full stop. I mean, there's a lot of failure fingers we can point around, but none quite as important as the two guys who had responsibility for being in that Overwatch building, where it would have been an easy, literal chip shot to hear, see, and neutralize Crooks as he came over onto that roof. Okay? Second, any proper investigation is going to be asking at the Secret Service end, who decided to place the two sniper teams like this? At the center of each of those red circles would have been Hercules 1 and Hercules 2. Now, your snipers are these big, long, reach out and touch someone kinds of folks. And here you can see that their overlap areas, if we just drew 1,000 foot diameter, and by the way, these guys can reach out way more than 1,000 feet. Multiply that by 1,000 yards. That's their duty range. So, and probably further if you gave them a couple shots. At any rate, highly trained people. These are chip shots for these guys with the gear they have. But they were completely on top of each other. And they're completely on top of the close quarter people who would have been in there. The most obvious spot to place a sniper team is actually on top of the roof right here. And this is the Overwatch building where those two local snipers went MIA for some reason. This is the roof that Crooks is on right under this red dot. This is the most obvious place to put somebody on a roof, because now you can actually see across the road. You can see the water tower. You can see everything. You have maybe have one here. Probably you want one actually probably closer to here. Now you can see all of this stuff, and then these guys up here can see everything. If a team had been placed exactly where any normal, rational human being would have placed one of these teams, none of this would have happened. So somebody needs to be asking, who decided to place the two sniper teams like this? And by the way, that name is also known. It's that little tag from ASKR Asker first surfaced this at my website in our investigation area and noted that the special agent in charge, the SAIC, is a guy named Tim Burke. There he is, right there, U.S. Secret Service, Pittsburgh, special agent in charge, Tim Burke. Somebody needs to ask Tim Burke, hey, Tim, why did you decide to place these snipers in a place where, in particular, it bears repeating, these people here who were in charge of the north, these sniper team Hercules 1 is facing south, right? Hercules 2 is facing north. Well, you see this little tree right here? Turns out that tree covers up. They can't see all of this half of the entire roof. They can't see half the complex. They couldn't see the place where Crooks was. This sniper team was not in a position to be able to take a shot because they couldn't see part of the roof structure. Nobody puts a sniper team where one of the most important things to protect is occluded by a tree. Done in one. Full stop. It's that simple. So we need to ask the right questions. This gentleman needs to be hauled up in front of an investigative committee, and they start asking, hey, Tim, why'd you do that? And then Tim gets to defer and delegate and say, oh, I didn't make the on-site decisions. That belonged to this other person. And then you get that person on, and you keep going until you find the person who made the decision to put those two snipers, counter sniper teams where they did, because it was absolutely inappropriate to place them there. Full stop. No question about it. And then further, any proper investigation is going to be asking, well, who made the decision to let Trump take the stage even, and then stay there, okay? Because we know that there's already a threat detected a full minute and a half before the shots ring out. Plenty of time to get somebody like Trump off the stage. In fact, they do it all the time. This is a standard operating fare. And by the way, the Secret Service doesn't have to ask permission. They don't have to go up to Trump and say, hey, would you be willing to let us take you off the stage? Their job is protectee safety. So the protectee, if they need to, they'll just come and pick you up by the armpits and off you go, right? Because they're going to keep you safe. That's their job. They don't have to ask permission, nothing like that. Now, of course, if you only had a 2-hour Zoom training where maybe the audio was out for a bit, I mean, that doesn't explain all of it. It can't be that all of them were knucklehead, Homeland Security agents who had no experience doing a protective detail. There must have been somebody in charge of that protective detail. So get them on the stand and ask them some questions. So let's add this all up. For the Secret Service side, we know they had counter snipers on Trump, maybe for the first time ever. They don't usually bring counter snipers. But they did. Okay. They deployed them really stupidly. So we have questions about that. They instructed local LEOs to be inside Building 6, positions in the southwest corner of that 2-story Overwatch building, right? They didn't attend meetings apparently, but maybe they did, but maybe they didn't. We have questions. Did they or didn't they? Investigation needs to ask this. No day of briefing with the locals. Locals disagree. Secret Service disagrees. They disagree. How are we disagreeing about this at this point? We're almost 2 months in. Let's get some answers to these things, okay? They declined and or refused to use a drone. And they said, oh, yeah, we were having communication errors or something like that, and didn't even communicate with themselves, apparently, because the snipers, Hercules 1 is swinging around while the local, the in-circle protectors were not taking Trump off the stage. Bizarre. And they didn't interview or debrief any law enforcement office, local law enforcement, as of August 9th. I don't know if that's actually happened since then. Nobody's asked, so we don't know. Have they? Haven't they? How do you not debrief these people day of? August 9th, we're closing in on a month after the fact, and they still hadn't, at that point in time, interviewed local law enforcement. Memories fade. Stories tighten up if there is a story involved. Bizarre. And then on the FBI side, man, they let everybody go less than an hour and a half after the shooting. You can see all these guys packing up and going home. This is an attempted assassination of a president. Oh, I know, but it's almost dark. Dinner time. It's just bizarre. Again, this wouldn't happen if it was anybody other than Trump. I would submit to you, they cleansed the crime scene. They literally cleaned the crime scene and broke the whole thing down within 3 days. It's gone. Released the entire crime scene by day 3. Released Crooks's body for cremation without notifying anybody, and then have provided very, very little information so far about any of this. So Congress, if you're going to ask questions, I get it. If you want a proper timeline, call us. We got one for you. Please ask questions. Special Agent in Charge Tim Burke, Murko, and Nickel. This is where you got to start on this whole investigation, because if you do, I promise you, you can unravel all of this. So with that, I'm going to move on to the next part, which is the FBI's latest non-disclosure release, but that's going to be for another episode. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll be back with you. I'm Chris Martinson. See you then.